Welcome back to the post-lunch session of the fifth edition of APAC HealthTech Innovation Conclave. Since morning, we had some interesting sessions on how government can make a difference in the healthcare ecosystem, how industry can make a difference in digital transformation. It was followed by a panel discussion on building resilient and sustainable healthcare infrastructure. It was followed by another panel discussion on the future of pharma ecosystem in a digitally empowered world. And then we had three industry presentations. And now we are back in the second half of this prestigious conclave. And for that, this panel discussion will be focusing on the digitization of the pharma industry, especially in the new normal. And for that, we have got eminent speakers with us who will be the part of this panel discussion. Let me first invite Mr. Rajneesh, consulting editor of APAC News Network, on stage, who will be playing the role of moderator for this session. Let me invite Mr. Ganesh Ramachandran, Global Chief Information Officer, Alkem Laboratories Limited. We welcome Mr. Ganesh. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are joined by Mr. Sreeji Gopinathan, Chief Information Officer, Lupin Limited. We welcome Mr. Sreeji. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are joined by Mr. Navin Singhania, Chief Information Officer, Oaknet Healthcare. We welcome Mr. Navin. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are also joined by Mr. Nikhil Shembekar, Head Digital Analytics, Supply Chain and Emerging Technologies at Pharma. We welcome Mr. Nikhil. We are also joined by Mr. Atanu Bhaumik, Head Technology Accelerator, PRISM Life Sciences Limited. I think we have seen Mr. Atanu. He was here only. I'll request Nikhil if you can just have a word with me because he's here. We welcome Mr. Atanu Bhaumik, Head of Technology, PRISM Life Sciences Limited. And we're also joined by Raxit Desai, Head Digital Initiatives of Zuventus Healthcare Limited. Can we have a chair on stage, please? I think we need two chairs, You will stand? Okay, fine. So Nikhil, one chair will do. So over to you, Rajneesh, and over to you, speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Shobik. It's always the most difficult time of a presentation of any conference immediately post-lunch. So all people are soporific at that time, and I'm sure all the eminent panelists here will energize the audience. It's a great responsibility on you. So Shobik has already done the introduction. So primarily what we would like to focus is especially post-pandemic, how the pharma industry are looking at different facets of digitization. And the way we would like is, I would first go through all of you panelists and ask each of you to mention one digitization initiative, which might be your organization has undertaken, or it might be what you feel is happening. And we are talking about not the things which have been happening for some years, but more we are like to emphasize on things which have happened post-pandemic. And then we will take it up from there. So maybe I'll start with you, Ganesh. If you can mention one key digitization initiative which either Alkem has done or overall in the pharma industry, which you feel is very relevant in the current situation.
Thanks. Is this on?
Sure.
Good. Okay. So thanks again for having me here, and great to be part of a face-to-face event with multiple friends from the industry. So, I think the big one that we did during the pandemic was we came up with a platform for doctors to engage their patients. It's called Connect to Clinic. We've had over 100,000 consultations that have happened on that platform. Over 35,000 doctors who are part of that platform and actively using it. So if you ask me the one initiative, I think that's the one that we really went after. Focused largely with customer centricity. So we went and asked our key customers, the doctors, what do they want help from us when the pandemic hit? And what they told us was that they were very worried about how their patients would stay healthy. And how do we also make sure that they stay engaged with their patients. So that's what we went out to build. And in June of 2020, we launched the beta version of this with a set of doctors. And post that, it's kind of grown on. So it is no longer we always wanted it to be a patient engagement platform, not just a teleconsult platform. So it has got info bites that can be shared with patients by doctors. It has got the remote practice as well that they can kind of do. So offline practice as well that they can take on, which currently is very helpful. And it's something that keeps evolving as we're going along. So now we are looking to kind of evolve it with more therapy-specific kind of areas that we are kind of going on to. Because each therapy has a different set of requirements. So a psychiatrist, for instance, may need a 45-minute to a 1-hour consultation as compared to a GP who needs hardly a 10-minute consultation. So things like that, along with how do you have clinical notes being captured, how do you have the ease of prescriptions kind of coming through. Those are the kind of things that we're looking to kind of add on. So if you ask me, my big takeaway or what we kind of put together on that was looking at saying how do we enable connections to happen with the doctors and for doctors with their patients. So that's the big thing that we took on. Thanks.
Excellent. In fact, in the next round, we would like to discuss more elaborately on this topic between a connection between pharma and healthcare and how digitization is sort of helping. Sreeji, I'll come to you next with the same question. The digitization initiative that you would like to sort of prioritize or mention.
Can I say ditto?
No, I would prefer.
No,
I'm
just
sure
kidding.
there will be multiple initiatives or something else.
Just kidding. Okay. No, so I think Ganesh has talked about the front-end patient engagement, doctor engagement initiatives. Let me talk about what we have done on the manufacturing and quality side. We have set out on a pretty significant digital transformation journey in that space. 20 plus use cases, but let me just pick out maybe one or two of those. The most interesting one that we are looking at is obviously the yield improvement one, which is easy to guess, but very difficult to get the actual results. We are focusing on a couple of our products, both in API as well as in formulation, and looking at how do we go to a top quartile first and then to a top decile in terms of the efficiency that we can get. So this sounds very simple, but it was not, because even the data sources in many cases were not digitized. So we had to go through an initiative of historical data digitization by using technologies like OCR and text reading technologies, and also we had to digitize the current data that is coming. So we had to start from there, go through the modeling exercise using the historic data that was converted. Basically sat a bunch of people down and they were actually running these algos on those historic data. And then we also had some of the partners here there as well worked with us to digitize some of the sources and then really develop data analytics core competency within the organization, not just in IT, but also in the other functions as well. So that is one interesting example that we are looking at. We are seeing some early results. Now we are trying to look at other products as well. Another one maybe I would like to call out is slightly different to a typical one would be things like root cause advisors. Where how do you go and find out when the line has stopped, or in a lab there is too much of incidents happening. How do you do a data-based root cause analysis rather than the traditional ways of looking at that particular case and figuring out what is wrong, and maybe even start predicting. In this particular type of test, there are chances that this might happen. What are the predictive steps that you can take in terms of avoiding it? So these are the kind of couple of use cases. There are many more that we're working on. Yeah.
Great. So I'll just, before going to the next speaker, ask you one question around. Since it's primarily data that you are gathering and then deriving insights out of it, two challenges there. One, there is an issue of data privacy, especially its medical records. And though there is certain ambiguity about data privacy in India, but still consciousness is arising. So how do you tackle that challenge there? And the other thing is, again, this data you are gathering from very diverse kind of sources. So one, that nature of the data is very disparate, and second is maybe even the authenticity of all the data might be suspect in certain cases. So in that case, ultimately to apply analytics and derive meaningful insights, unless the data itself is in any case compromised, then there will be a challenge. So how are you looking at meeting these
Well, I mean,
challenges?
see, when you look at data privacy, it's mostly about the external data that we are concerned about, patient data, doctor data, whatever. And we actually are not interested in knowing whose data it is. You know, we by policy, we make sure that that data doesn't get into our system. So we are only interested in the what of the data, and that gets in an aggregated manner into our systems, and that's what we use for analytics. When it comes to internal data, more than privacy, it's a regulatory concerns which we are more worried about. And you know, the good thing is that in the recent past, if you really look, even regulators want digitization, right? Because they have seen that where the digitization has happened, the audits and the checks that they're able to do is a lot more faster and authentic rather than waiting for the results for a day or two after asking for the data. So, and they are also encouraging us. So you know, the challenge there is when you start feeding back, you know, the loop of the control system back into the machines or the instruments, that's where the challenge is. We are not there yet. Okay, we are still collecting the data.
Okay.
We are analyzing the data. We are feeding the outcomes to the people. And people are then taking a decision to take action or not. So the maturity curve is not there yet.
Okay, got it. So Navin, next I'd come to you and your digitization initiative that you would like to highlight.
So when the pandemic broke out, I was working in Pfizer, and one fine day we had a lockdown and we had 2,000 strong field force which had nothing to do. So luckily we were having Viva. So I talked to Viva guys, can we initial have a setup of video calling to the doctors? So we did that, and within 2 weeks we were able to set up video calling with all the doctors, by which we were able to showcase all our products as we were detailing earlier, only through a digital media, and only approved content was shown to them, and doctors were very happy because they were not able to see anybody. But earlier in the clinic, if you are getting 30 seconds, 1 minute, doctors were giving us at an average of 9 to 10 minutes in those sessions. That was the one biggest initiative we did. Plus from employees also, we had this point that we were initiating teams for collaboration. So wherever you are, you have a file share and you have video calling and chat and everything enabled. So 2,000, 3,000 field force and office staff, they're able to use Teams very effectively and during this pandemic season. Those are two big things which we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, that point which we would like to take up in the next round, that's collaboration between pharma and healthcare more. So we'll take this up next. So Nikhil, I'll come to you next, and my point is.
Thanks. So I think, so at Sun Pharma, I handle multiple portfolios, including manufacturing and analytics, as well as the HR technology piece. So while there were multiple initiatives which have been done in the digitization side over the last couple of years, primarily on the manufacturing, improvement of employee productivity. I think Sreeji spoke about yield improvement and stuff like that. So we've also been doing some working around that. It's a tough problem to crack. But one thing that we did over the last couple of years, which is very close to my heart, is we digitized the entire employee life cycle events. So we implemented success factors, which was done globally for more than 30,000 employees at Sun Pharma, including our subsidiary companies and other areas as well. So this essentially helped us to move away from paper-based records to completely digitizing the entire talent management, succession, learning, the entire employee life cycle activities. And just a couple of days back, we also went live with our payroll system as well. So we completely digitized the entire employee experience, so to speak of. And there will be many more initiatives that we are going to undertake in this area. So while we did a lot of work on the manufacturing and supply chain and those areas, but I think this is another area which kind of gets overlooked, but it's also an important thing, from an employee experience perspective. So that's what I wanted to highlight actually.
Great. So in fact, when you're talking about employee lifecycle management, I'd like to ask, it might sound funny, but the thing is, unlike many of the sectors who we know initially in 2020, definitely went work from home, and then gradually, though that number dwindled, but still significant people, but pharma being, as you rightly mentioned, a manufacturing-based industry and connected closely with healthcare, many cases you just can't do work from home. You can't manufacture from
In
home.
fact, I think none of the plants actually shut down. I think for just barring for a day or so, I think none of the plants were actually shut
So
down.
how did you manage that?
So I think, so that's where I think a lot of the people on the ground were empowered to take a lot of decisions in terms of ensuring a clean and, a sanitized workplace. So ability, including the top management, also visited a lot of the plants, to give more confidence to all the employees. So these were some of the initiatives that were undertaken actually. So, and also ability for a lot of the people sitting in corporate so that they can work from home and support the people and the plants. So those are some of the initiatives which you undertook
Okay.
actually.
Great. Atanu, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, thank you, APAC. Two challenges right now. Session after the lunch. Second, last in the queue. All options over almost. Okay, looking at the kind of digitization approaches what we have taken, we have certain plans in our company, and it was more of internal approach what we have taken, where we have looked at human make errors. So what we went ahead in getting an automation done and digitization done, creating a convergence between the IT part and the OT part.
Okay.
This is where we have started getting into and exploring the possibilities, and that is what we have started upon. A, B, the data was already existing, but then this was mostly human generated data kind of things. So we have looked into a situation where uh, this particular thing can be addressed upon, and using the digitization and IT convergence and convergence possibilities and all those things, and we have arrived at, yeah, it is a possible thing for us as a manufacturing in our manufacturing process while we are getting into other automation parts. So that is what I think in precisely I would say, because there are other leading effects to this, which
Okay.
will follow as it comes in, which will generate the data analytics. And this is more not towards the market approach, it's more of an internal corrections and building our own health first.
So that's interesting. You mentioned about the IT and the OT part. See, one challenge which many of the, not just pharma, any manufacturing industry are looking at an IoT deployment, we're facing is we are fairly conversant with the, especially when talking about security, with the IT security part. There are a fairly good amount of solution providers who are helping, and but the OT, that's the real challenge. How do you isolate the OT
tell you.
first, the production environment, and those OT security challenges? So, what has been your
See,
experience?
what we have done is we have created a perimeter security, and we have created a virtual LAN in our system, wherein the OT is definitely generating its data, but then it is having in isolation a demilitarized zone, which is not a part. So the IT guys, which is the business data probably, or the workflow data which is coming out from the process workflow and the process reengineering which is being done, those areas of data are not in any which ways intersecting with this. It's about accumulating this data in a system, in a source, keeping it in isolation, like quarantined patients inside an hospital kind of things. That's how it is coming out. And whenever on the need basis, this with the zero trust, that is what I'm saying. Things are going to follow as first things are done. And
Sure.
also, this will address to much extent to the question what was posed to the friend,
Sure.
how a production can be managed from sitting at home. Well, digitization will do that, and it's not far away.
Uh, Last but not the least, Raxit, I'll come to you. Your point of view on the digitization initiative you would like to highlight.
Uh, okay, so we as an organization realize that digitization is very important role, and to grow and connect better, digitization is very important role. So we have started with various digital initiatives, and our key focus remain on the three things: better customer experience, better healthcare professionals experience and better employee experience. So our digital initiative, which we are planning and to roll out, is somewhat revolves around improving the experience altogether. Uh, Most of has spoken about engagement with the doctors digitally. So that is something, one of the important area going forward. The traditionally the human to human touch augmented with the digital touch point as well, and the entire journey, the life cycle and the experience and engagement in the hybrid way is something the way forward. And that is something giving the pandemic has also shown that is something the way forward, and there is a better connect. Someone has definitely said that doctor is giving more time digitally, and that establish more stronger relationship with healthcare provider. Same way, the patients are becoming more and more information aware. So the information is no longer restricted nowadays. So how to have the information which customer needs in a better way, and how to engage them with overall their health is something a very important one. So content we see as another important area to drive everything, and to have the excellent customer experience, or say healthcare experience, it is very important that the internal employee experience become richer. And they also basically we are also planning about the change management in terms of having a digital literacy, and having a right set of learning in the team for connecting digitally and using the things for better productivity, better relationship building, and ultimately driving a better experience altogether.
Excellent. So, if I may sum up what is coming out is two areas very broadly, if I say. One, most people have focused on the internal digital transformation, be it in terms of, as you mentioned, enhancing productivity, optimizing productivity, if I may say, improving customer experience, then a lot of employee experience, the internal employee experience, then things like production environment where IoT deployment has been enhanced. And the second area that we heard about is what we'd like to discuss now, connect with the healthcare, the doctors in the hospitals. So since Ganesh and Navin, I think, mentioned this point, I'll start this round with two of you, maybe with Ganesh first. If we look at in isolation pharma sector and the healthcare sector, and we heard about healthcare sector from the morning also, but one challenge is there. Pharma, if we see in the IT maturity curve, is on much higher level. There has been much stringent IT deployment there. On the other hand, healthcare not so. One of the reasons till now, the caregivers themselves, the doctors and maybe even the nurses, they have not been that way IT savvy or technology savvy. Maybe they are busy with what their primary role has been. So when there is a disparity in the IT maturity between a pharma and the healthcare sector, and you are saying, and obviously during the pandemic, its necessity has driven the two to converge together, and that's where our theme today is also, where health tech and pharma tech converge. So, what has been the challenge that you faced, and how did you mitigate that challenge?
Thanks for the question. Thanks. This one works. Thank you. So great point. So I think the thing that we really saw, many of the initial hypotheses that we had when we launched. So let me just back up a bit. So March of 2020, when we said, what do we need to do? Like Navin was pointing out again, saying, how do we get our people to engage with doctors? That was where it started out, right? But when we went, so we did what any good organization would do, which is we went and spoke to about 2,000 of our doctors and said, doctor, what would you like from us? And what we heard was very eye-opening. What we heard was doctors said what I had said earlier. And so the hypothesis initially for us going in was exactly what you laid out, that perhaps the doctors who are younger would adopt digital technologies more. Doctors who are in metro cities would adopt it more. But we were wrong on both counts. We found that many of the older doctors have been some of the most ardent users of platforms. We have found that in tier 2 towns, many of them have been using platforms to connect with specialists where they don't have a thing or they want a referral, and they've been getting patients to join them on the call to kind of take it across. So we found many of what we thought was the initial thing, those hypotheses got busted. And it got busted very early on as we started out our initiative. Second, I would tend to disagree that pharma is ahead of the curve on digital. I think we've got a long way to catch up, especially with some of the other industries, and we were talking about at lunch. So we do have a long way to catch up in pharma as well, especially when it comes to the front office. So if you were to look at the place where the healthcare and pharma industry merged, I think it was in the common goal of saying that we want to ensure that patients remain healthy. If you look at all that pharma did, whether it was making sure that manufacturing was running, the supply chain and distribution chains were kind of ensuring the last mile that the drug was available to patients, I think that is where the pharma and healthcare really came together. Specifically to the point that you raised, saying that how did it really come together, what were things that we did to make sure it happened? From the get-go, when we started launching the platform, we realized very clearly that this required a lot of hand-holding. Hand-holding, so the people who were taking the platform across to the doctors were our internal sales staff, which we have a large number, which kind of helped. So we trained them, got them in turn to train the doctors and take them through what it was about, why should they consider a platform like this. Second, we also set up a 24/7 call center support because it wasn't just the doctors who wanted handholding. The patients as well needed a lot of handholding.
Exactly.
And especially if you look at rural India, what people call as Bharat, where many of the patients were actually kind of coming in for things like this, you saw that they had very basic queries because some of the patients who were older had no clue on how to use these kinds of platforms. So helping them through the payment gateway, scheduling appointments, making sure they came in. If a prescription was uploaded, where did they go and pull it out from? How do they kind of access it? All of those required handholding, not just at an English level, but also at vernacular levels. So from the word get-go, we had a 24/7 call center support that we invested in. Okay. And said that the call center needs to be trained, the people will handhold not just doctors, but patients. And there was also a fair amount of tech support that was provided by our teams to the call center to be able to take these guys along. Point number one. Point number two was, given that we are a lot more comfortable as an industry, like Nikhil was also mentioning, it's a very face-to-face led industry, right? So the doctor was comfortable with my sales guy on the ground. Okay. So we also said, doctor, if you have a problem, reach out to this person. And he will do whatever is necessary internally to help you get what you require. That again helped in the platform gaining mileage and people being able to take it across.
So MRs played a pivotal
The
role.
MRs, we were connecting with doctors and saying, and initially, almost for the first 3 months, the entire leadership team, me included, were reaching out to the doctors who had consultations and said, what worked well, what didn't work well, what did you like, what didn't you like, how can I make the experience better for you? It was a whole amount of deep dive that we did on it to understand what worked, what did not work. Because simple things like what you think is what is required, when the guy goes on over there, he finds that this is not the way it is. For example, when you set a teleconsultation appointment, the guy goes in for the consultation, and we had initially the consultation that doctors were taking on their phones. And he got a call in between, and the consultation dropped. What does he do then? So even simple ones like that were ones that we needed to troubleshoot on and make sure that you had a problem-free solution, especially in a country like India where you have different kinds of mobile phones that people carry, different kinds of platforms that they are all part of, different versions of the Android that they are on. You needed to have a solution that worked across all of this. And the initial parts, we failed miserably, to tell you very honestly. Including where, and a lot of it was a learning that we came with on what could blindside you. So for instance, the day we launched, we suddenly found that the OTPs were not working. And everything was great till then. So what happened? TRI had come out with a regulation saying that you cannot have marketing and you need to register as a non-marketing agency if you wanted OTPs to go through. We had no clue on it. So And all of this contributes to the experience of the patient and the doctor, because when they see a platform coming, and which is what you and I would like when we kind of engage with the platform, it should be hassle-free. It should help me in what I'm doing. And that is what our biggest learning was. And to that extent, I go back to what I was saying. I don't think it matters whether it was pharma or healthcare, providing a seamless experience, providing something that helps the user, and the ability to add on things. So for instance, the other thing which we kind of picked up was we found that many of the people, especially in rural places, even in metros, were setting the appointment up for an older person and they were elsewhere, either overseas or they were in some other city. So you need a three-way consult to be happening, not just a doctor and a patient consultation. So enabling all those as part of the product features was what we kind of learned and went along on our journey, and I think that's what helped in making it work.
That's
So long
excellent.
answer to a short question, apologies.
Yes, but very excellent, valid points. We'll talk a little more detail about this later. Yeah, Navin.
I think the biggest loser in this whole epidemic were those guys who are suffering from chronic diseases or who are having, or the oncology patients, right? Because they were not able to meet their doctors or have a consultation like, now I'm a diabetic, I'm not able to do walking because in my society walking is stopped. Now, those were the issues which patients were facing and trying to reach out to doctors, and were finding there is no single platform where they can do it, right? So what we did was we started this telemedicine for rural patients as well as for three way, like he said. Three ways. One, there's a doctor who's sitting in that city, like maybe Sholapur, maybe for example. He will have a consultation with a specialist sitting in Bombay. So if you are a chronic patient like arthritis, or you are an oncology patient, earlier you used to go once a month to Bombay hospital, get the consultation done, come back, right? Now that possibility is not there. How do you do that? So therefore we did the telemedicine thing. You sit in your place, go to that nearest doctor who is enrolled in this platform. He will set it up with you, and then you have a three-way communication. So those are the things which were like, at the time when you face this issue, you realize how do you handle that, right?
Okay.
And we realize, of course, that, there are patients who are now relying more and more on Google. I think there was a 3 times jump in patients looking for treatment for things like headache. Things like, so because they are stressed out, they don't know what to do, so they'll Google it. Now, how do you get this information as a company and then figure out what you're going to do? So, those are the stuff which we have been working out and see how we can make doctors come together on a platform like telemedicine and allow patients to search for things which they're looking for in the pandemic. So like platforms like 1mg, this Apollo 24/7, PharmEasy, they have grown like anything in the last 2 years. Earlier nobody was going to there for, because they had a chemist who is just beside you. Now they feel कि यार नीचे नहीं जाना है, chemist के पास नहीं जाना, somebody should drop the medicine at my society door, I will put the sanitizer on top of it and I take my medicine. And that is regularly, those who are regular patients, for them it is very important that they get their medicine in time. कल अगर खत्म हो रही है दवाई तो एक दिन पहले घर में आ जानी चाहिए. So those are the things which I have seen has helped in this whole pandemic stuff. And what is more important is like, we have got in all companies, I think who are sitting here, we have got this platform called Doctors Pro, we call it. Everybody is putting their product there in these platforms. Now doctors are not interested in having so many platforms for them. They would like to have a single placeholder जहाँ पे वो अपना appointment करेगा, अपना patients का details देखेगा, whole file is there, and then he is happy. So for that I realized Practo was very successful. They provided that single platform where appointment is managed, consultation is managed, teleconsultation is managed, medication is managed, everything is done. So doctors were that way very happy in finding out these solutions in that pandemic.
Okay. So both of you mentioned a lot of aspects on this connection between pharma and healthcare. 2 things arising out of which. One, which Ganesh earlier mentioned, if we look at ultimately all these depended on these platforms depended on connectivity, the quality of connectivity. And we know, and especially when you are talking about hinterland, we are going to the hinterland, the quality of connectivity definitely is not uniform. It's pretty poor in many areas beyond the metros. So when there is a question over the quality of internet connectivity, how did you ensure that uniformly that reaches out? That is one. The second aspect, Navin, you mentioned about that Googling for diseases. There's an aspect, in fact, when the lockdown started, it was coincidental, but at the same time, the telemedicine bill got passed. Now, that brings with up a lot of these medical legal challenges, and a lot of doctors were very concerned about that. It's typical, these patients doing their own googling. And so when you are talking about these platforms proliferating, how did this medical legal aspect, how that challenge from that aspect got mitigated? So this is an open question, any one of you can take it up.
So I think always it goes. Okay, good. So when we launched the platform, the telemedicine guidelines had come out end of March. The first draft came out end of March. And we did look at all of those guidelines when we went in with it. So one, I think the basic one that you look at when you're a pharma company providing a platform like this is, I have no idea what is the prescription the doctor is writing. Whatever is between the doctor and the patient is between them. Right? It's encrypted, it's kept between them. I don't have access to it. I don't know if he's written a drug, I don't know what drugs have been prescribed. It is what the doctor thinks is right for their patients.
But that was conforming to the regulation?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The second big part of the regulation that was needed was you needed to validate that it was a bona fide doctor before you got the doctor enrolled on the platform. So which meant that you needed the MCI registration number, it got validated, and only then you kind of got the doctor on the platform. The onus to ensure that it's a bona fide doctor was the platform. Okay. And the third big one associated with the first point was the entire area of data privacy and information security was the onus of the platform again. So the platform was supposed to maintain the information security part that was there. So the platform that we have, of course, it's built on a cloud architecture and a serverless architecture. But it takes care of all the basic principles of InfoSec, is HIPAA compliant, and pertains, and that was something that we showed doctors as well, that this is what we had, and which is what led doctors to believe that they should not do consultations on some of the other platforms or the regular messaging platforms that were available to them on which they were consulting earlier. Coming to your question of connectivity, so what we looked at was today, if you look at connectivity, most of the rural areas in India as well, everyone uses mobiles. They stream, they kind of pick up shows on their mobile. So we looked for a platform that had a low amount of capability for a video consult that was required. And it's not that you need the video consultation to be on right through the 15 minutes if it's a 15-minute consultation. Typically, a doctor looks for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and after that, he just takes you through what is required. That is what we have gone with, and we mimicked as much as possible what the real life was. So if it's a first-time consultation, you have a separate kind of a time structure and costing for it, or follow-on consultation could have different, and you can upload multiple things on it. So that's the way we kind of went through the questions that you raised. I mean, if you want to add in.
So if I may,
Sreeji,
can you hear me? Is it working?
Yeah, sure.
So in addition to what Ganesh said, what looked good for us is we actually created a sort of a platform even before this pandemic started, which was actually bringing together legal help for doctors. Now, that kind of gave us a headway. So what we did is that in that platform, we brought in what is relevant for it from a teleconsult point of view. And that was absorbed by the legal professionals who was already in the platform, and they could very quickly turn around and provide any help that the doctors needed. So whatever we do in terms of the compliance requirement, information security requirements, there were problems. Okay, and doctors were very thankful in this scenario that they were actually not out there, they were all sitting at home, and then they were also getting virtual help as far as legal complications are concerned. So many of those were also built into the platform, and that's kind of becoming a standard now if you look at some of the platforms that is coming out.
Okay, thanks. Navin, you wanted to add something?
So I think the biggest point which you are talking from pharmacological is where do you keep the patient information and the history of prescription. So there what we did was we kept at arm's length. We had a vendor who was doing this whole management, and of course encrypted. No information was coming back to us except the summary. How many consultations were done? Is there any repeat consultation? We didn't even know which medication he's been prescribed. Is there our medicine or computation medicine? We didn't influence on that one. It's just more like an initiative by which you bring the patient and doctor together and then figure out what to do.
Got it. Thanks. Nikhil, I'll come to you. This is the concluding round, and what I would like to you focused on the manufacturing, the supply chain distribution. So now my question is looking ahead. If we look ahead for the next 3 to 4 quarters, maybe 18 to 24 months, slightly longer. So where do you think, especially vis-a-vis manufacturing or the supply chain or distribution logistics, where would the maximum digitization take place and what shape it would take up?
Thanks. I think that's a very important question. I think all of us are, from a pharma perspective, I think we know that I think pharma is now picking up, on the digitization part. So I think we were all laggards, and thanks to the pandemic, I think things have kind of slowly improved in terms of the, uptake in terms of implementing digital technologies and solutions in multiple areas. My own take is there will be a lot more focus on the manufacturing and supply chain. Of course, there will be other areas. I don't want to, read too much from a futuristic perspective. But what I see is there will be an increased focus on improving productivity, in our manufacturing areas. A lot of talk is happening in terms of improving yield, ability to ship your drugs faster, ability to respond to the situations like COVID in a much more faster way. So I think there will be an increased focus in digitization on the manufacturing side. There will be more automation, what we call as the Industry 4.0. There will be more plans. Some of the pharma companies are already much ahead. Most of the pharma companies will now play catch up in those areas. So I think this is what I feel, if I really look at it.
Okay, great. Atanu, okay. I'll just first put one question to Atanu. You mentioned about the IoT deployment that you have done and how that will look at, see, one of the things, what we have seen during the pandemic is the clinical trials, because especially all the vaccines, the whole process, maybe the clinical trial process is usually much longer, while it was shortened obviously for reasons we all know. So how will an IoT deployment or those sort of digitization help in not just, I'll say, smoothening the entire, also accelerate the rate of manufacturing? And so what is the role of digitization there?
Well, it cannot be a quick one-line answer, number one. Number two, when you're talking about convergence of IT and OT, I am talking many things in that one line. Is A, probably there will be a very low requirement of the quality mechanism, the quality control mechanism. The quality control mechanism will be shortened as a result, because the failure rate, the mean difference between two failures, will automatically come down. As I say, the errors are made by not by the design of the process. The errors are made adhering to the process. Now, while automation takes over, the human element is getting controlled, number one.
While that quality control, the process can be shortened.
See, quality control,
But how that won't that impact the
I'll tell you,
conformance part?
I'll tell you. I'll try to relate it to the floor shop. What is happening? Say there's a batch which is going on, and there are three stages. Just a hypothetical example. So the output of stage one becomes input for the stage two. Now, whatever is expected out and going in, there will be a loss due to material handling, and there are other factors like that. Just to keep it short, I'm just
Okay,
hiding
so
for
you are
example.
automating
So there will be a cost management coming into the production will automatically go up because your estimates are going as per the plans.
Exactly.
So these are the other things, and it will have numerous subsets to that, if you look at it that way. And also along with that, when I was talking about the data, and we should not be missing out, we will be leading to everything into just trying to join the previous question and this question together so that the take home is a better one, that the traceability of the activities
That
at the
gets
different stages of the
amplified
logistics
also.
from the OEM to the patient. All of this is again happening to happen, and there is something like blockchain will take on, I believe.
Great. Yeah, Sreeji, you were saying something.
I was just coming back to the future question that you asked. I thought it's very important to bring a very significant market situation that most of the pharma companies will be facing. The pricing erosion happening in US is actually having an impact on all of our organizations, I believe. And that means, while we are wanting to invest on a lot of these digital transformation and technologies, there has to be a lot of focus on taking cost out. And there also digitization will play a role, but it's a different sort of digitization, technologies like RPA, for example.
So to look at optimization
Yeah, gross to net calculation and the leakages that happens in that discounts and the claims that happen in the US market. FTS, failure to ship, related penalties. These are also becoming very, very high focus areas, and technology has a significant role to play. Otherwise, US market is becoming extremely challenging for us.
Okay. Raxit, maybe you have the last word on the future roles and plans.
I think the digitization is very important for being relevant and also to grow. Some of the points which came is the hybrid connectivity is one of the important part with the engagement with the HCPs and all. Data being very important role. So the content which engage and content which educate is something very important part in digitization, and digital content being easily accessible is somewhat important. The another important area I believe is the when the digitization gives access of lot of data generation and insights. So using this data for more meaningful actionable insight is something very important. So having a like business intelligence kind of a platform and all the capabilities within the team to utilize those data for faster decision making and doing corrections, very rapidly is the very important part for being more successful. Like somebody he mentioned that how initially going and experimenting of the platform they did, and learning quickly and from those failures and mistakes and correcting it quickly. So data analytics is also very important one. So whatever digitization we do, the digitization gives the ability of the analytics. So this must be taken care very well, and this must be driven with the proper change management within the organizations to make this successful, so that this doesn't become only a activity of being present on digitally, but it actually acceptance of digital digitization and taking the real benefit of it.
Exactly. So when we conclude, we may sum up the going ahead post-pandemic. The primary digitization focus has been creation of platforms where pharma connect with the healthcare givers, the doctors in hospitals. A lot of manufacturing processes have been accelerated, and more and more automation so that the errors also come down. An important aspect that was mentioned was optimization so that the budgets are kept to a minimal. Lot of focus on internal employee improvement and the life cycle management of employee, enhancing customer experience. Excellent points were discussed today. Due to paucity of time, we have to finish it here. And just before wrapping up, I would like to invite Ms. Shangamitra Mohanty to just hand over a token of appreciation to all our panelists. May I request Ganesh Ramachandran? Sreeji Gopinathan. Singhania. Mr. Nikhil Shembekar for the HealthTech Innovation Leadership Award. Mr. Atanu Bhaumik. Mr. Raxit Desai. Thanks. Okay, we can have a group photo. May I request Shavik to come for the next session?